So now, the ever popular question that sort of was touched on by some of you, the promotional strategies and challenges that you face in selling your books. We'll start with Loretta.
Well, as I said, I have sort of an odd challenge because I can't hold up my book and say, see, isn't this wonderful? Don't you want to take it home? Buy them for Christmas presents? It's a little different to have to say, okay, well, you can get it from BarnesandNoble.com, you can get it from Amazon.com, you can get it from Kobo, you can even get it from Walmart. But you need to pull the trigger. Here's the ISBN number, go. And how many people are likely to follow through? I don't know. That's sort of, I'm at the beginning of this, and I know I've sold some, but you have to be a little creative in how you promote. And again, from writers' workshops at conferences, I learned a lot of different strategies. And they always said, as you were talking before about bringing all your interests and all your talents and all your regular work. I'm an editorial consultant and a book editor and a magazine writer and a grant writer in my so-called spare time. And that brings me in touch with a lot of people. I'm also a musician, and I write a movie blog I started the blog, and it's called Hollywood Castaway, about old Hollywood. And I sort of got that started as a bit of a springboard for this. And my band agreed to learn some movie music. So we got on a radio station, and we're going to get on another one doing movie music and talking about the book and talking about Hollywood. And I now have a library presentation that my own library is going to schedule. They promised me in January to coincide with award season, because that's another thing that you guys touched on before. Ride the wave if you have a season.
Yeah, exactly.
So I also, luckily, I was a newspaper woman for a number of years and wrote press releases, so I'm able to do my own press releases and do my own outreach. But it's trial and error, as you guys know.
Loretta brought up some really good points about tying in all the other aspects of your life to leverage, the attention to your book. And I've been a massage therapist for 20 years, and my husband to this day says, I'll give you a topic, and I guarantee you my wife can connect it to massage inside of 30 seconds. So, and I've gotten even more subtle about being able to do it over the years. But it's the truth. Like, when you have something that you do, there are so many aspects and parts to you. There's you that writes the book, there's you that plays the music, there's you that works with small children or whatever. We're all, I didn't mean you personally, I mean you. There are so many component pieces of a human being's psychology. You definitely connect with somebody at any kind of level. And, some of the best places to do that are places like the Collingswood Book Festival this past weekend, where I got to put on my P.T. Barnum hat and showmanship, and I basically made eye contact with everybody that walked by. I asked them where they bought their pretzel. I mean, they had pretzel breaks. I'm like, oh, where'd you get the pretzel? And they come in and they tell me where they got the pretzel, and they're like, oh, what do you do? So you don't really have to put yourself in a framework or a box. Any kind of human contact will work. Ask somebody about their dog. Ask their, there's, again, like, E, where'd you get your scarf? Exactly. There's all those conversations are the human element that gets people to take an interest in you and what you do. And that's where you have the springboard. The springboard is that we're all just humans. So that's where your basic human marketing comes into play. You all have a story. Oh, I wish I wrote a book. Everybody can write a book. You can write a book. I did. If I can do it, anybody can do it. And you get them talking about, well, what interests you? What do you like to read? The connection between the people and you is what makes them like you. And I had a woman come in and she had a cartload of books. Like, this woman must have taken out a bank loan for every book. She must have bought a book from everybody there. Wow. But she comes in my booth and she goes, I got $15 left. What makes your book so damn special that I should buy it? I'm like, wow. And I love this woman's chutzpah. I loved it. So I said, all righty. Rolled up my sleeves. I said, okay, here's my 30-second pitch. And I gave her my probably 22-second pitch. And she said, wow, you told me pretty much nothing about your book, and I want to buy it. Here's my $15. I'm like, winner, winner, chicken dinner for me. And that's what works for me. But everybody has some way they can connect with somebody else. Everybody. And so that's really where the networking component and marketing component really, comes into it. And anybody can do it. Just be yourself, really.
I think being yourself is probably easier said than done for a lot of writers. There's a lot of writers in some of the groups that we have where they say, okay, I've put the book up on Amazon and that's it.
Yeah.
Like that's okay. That's step one. Good thing you got that done. Now here's steps 1 through 10. I like working with the websites and newspapers and magazines because it gives me a regular byline. Every week. When I'm really good, sometimes it's something that's daily where my name is out there. There's a lot of people who know who I am. They think I'm something big and fancy, and I'm kind of like, well, it doesn't really show, in my bank account, does it? But that's okay. So you have to kind of, have your presence around all the time in anything. And even when I've had the ebook series, it's been amazing where I've been at events where I've talked about it and people have been right there with the SNCC with their phone. Even when I've done a real world event, I've gone back and seen like an uptick on whatever was on the e-bookseller websites. And there's been times where I've gone to events where everybody knew me because I always had bat-shaped cookies, and it was would you like a cookie? Here's a bookmark. You have to do anything and everything like that in any kind of connection. We had the skull display, and other people would go to events and say, where are the people who had those skull displays? So little things like that remind people of who you are. They begin to remember. They know where to find you. They know where to see everything. Then it becomes they're looking for what's next. And especially today, like when I was writing for weekly newspapers, it's like, oh, that seemed like such a big deal. Now it's kind of like you look at a lot of these web content pages who want like 300 words a day. And you're kind of like, okay. And again, you're still weighing that, like you said, not waving all over the place, me. A lot of that's a lot of filler content. So you have to weigh the balance of, yes, here's my blog, here's my connection, here's where you can find me. There's like so many things that you have to interconnect. And for some reason this month I'm doing a whole series on crafts for our addicts.net. Do I write about crafts? No. Do I have any books that have a lot of crafts in them? No, but it's that where it's already a group community where these are things that we all know we have this kind of like-minded interests, and we're all talking about different DIY, and I'm posting pictures and they're posting pictures. Everything has to have media, everything has to have some kind of visual kind of connection so that people are going to remember not necessarily your book, whether it was good or bad or what the title was, but they're going to remember you and your name, and then they're going to be seeking that book. Right. And that's how you kind of build up from, well, okay, I had $10 at one event, what do you do? Then it becomes where, okay, maybe I am, a professional at this. Maybe I have made something of this. When all of a sudden you do see a build and an uptick. And when, even though it was an ebook series, I was on a book tour for over a year. And there were times when I was doing something every weekend. And that was the most I ever made, and I was completely baffled because I did not have physical books. Wow. But and I thought, okay, so again, it's you never know what works, but you have to try it.
Yeah, well, I think an important word to consider is relevance. Your book has to have relevance, and it may not be relevant to everybody out there, but depending on how you pitch it, depending on who you talk to. Whether it's massage, getting back to massage, storytelling, for crying out loud, storytelling is older than the alphabet. It goes way back to when we could communicate through words and wanted to explain something to somebody else. So that's how our brains are wired for narrative. It's how we best remember information if we can house it within a story. I had a high school history teacher who was part of World War II. We hated history, but if we could get them off on telling stories about the bombings and the planes and the naval maneuvers, we would sit there and the bell would ring and we'd have to get up and leave and go to the next class. Love that stuff. So find the relevance in your book, and from there you may discover that you have many more markets than you originally thought. And being flexible with conversations and being willing to make eye contact. I being an extrovert, that's hard for me too, believe it or not. And just people walk by and your table and at an event and making the eye contact, making some sort of Tom Minder. He will stand there with a card. Can I tell you about my mystery novel? And he's right out in their face with the hand. The arm is almost blocking their path, you know. And he's got such a wonderful pitch about it. It's got this, and his brother just killed his bookie, and you go, what? That's all in one book? So find what's special about your particular title or your particular series if you have more than one. There has to be common elements in them because they all came from here. And if you know what that relevance is, you've got a starting point for the social media, for a book event somewhere, for a library versus a school versus, you know, you're out at an antique shop or somewhere. There are ways of tying your book into wherever you end up. And that might not be planned, but it's definitely something that you can learn along the way. Take notes.
Yeah, there's a lot of good suggestions, and don't worry, I haven't skipped you.
He's warming up to himself before he moves on.
I'm working into my spiel, but no. So yeah, I definitely agree about what I find is if you can, for me, I mean, I write vampire novels, so it's not something where, and they're adult level vampire novels, so it's pretty, you know, nasty stuff. It's not going to be, I can't go into a school and say, so I'm going to sit down and read to the kids. From my hard R-rated, you know, vampire novel, and you know, I'd love to do that, but no, it's not gonna work. So what I found for me, marketing wise, the only thing I found that works is trying to make myself sort of an expert on vampires. Mm-hmm. So I give talks about vampires. I've done research into the folklore and the literature and so forth. And I'll go to conventions and I'll actually get booked doing a speech and do a whole presentation about the history of vampires from their folklore origins up until like how they made it into literature. And then afterwards I say, oh, and by the way, I have these vampire books that I've written. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you know, usually there's some translation. People will go, oh, well, those must be really interesting books. You know, if this guy was interesting, you know, talking about all this stuff, you know, his books must be, you know, must have some of that in there. Mm-hmm. So there's a conversion, and that's pretty much how I sell almost all my books. I hardly sell anything online. So that's what I've found that works for me the most effective, is making yourself an authority on something that you can relate to your work.
Good point.
I had an unexpected challenge in promotion because I can't really describe my book in 100 words or less, you know, so I had to find a specific starting point, and the starting point was Cassie Volkner, because people would come by and they would see her on the front cover, and it's like, oh, well, who's that, you know? And then I would talk about like Cassie Volkner, who's probably one of the more interesting characters in the book, one of the more human characters in the book, you know. And I was fortunate enough to have a book cover that kind of popped, you know, and it was a conversational point. The other thing, I'm probably going to get hell for this, that I published my book, and it's about basically tolerance, you know, that it's about insects, intelligent insects, and they kind of look down on like the rest of the galaxy, you know. And it came out shortly after November 8th, 2016. So people would come up to me and I would find this connection, you know, about the current political situation and tolerance, you know, and it would start these conversations and
what you said, Dave.
Yeah.
Exactly, it's tied to
Yeah.
the social aspect.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
and 5 times out of 10 it would wind up with me signing a book to a person, you know, so
Cool.
just like you said, Laura, like relating it to what was currently going on in our society, you know, and making that connection work, you know. So, and just, I try to be like Tom too. I try to like, at Collinswood, I was like, everybody was stopping by. It's like, would you like to hear about my book? Would you like to hear about my book? They might have been like 8 feet away from me. I was like, hey, would you like to see my book? You know?
The hard sell.
Yeah, that's hard for me to do. That's outside my comfort zone.
Yeah, and if you, lastly, you know, just find like, and my poor suffering wife will attest to this, that just find like any venue to go to, you know, find a bookstore, a comic book convention, an author panel, a library, a supermarket opening, anything, you know, where you can sit and you can have a table and you can connect with people,
Right.
you know, and that is like the best promotion for that I think.
I would agree. You find yourself in places where you don't think you fit, but because you don't fit, you are the center of attention.
Yeah,
So,
opposites attract.
yeah, I've been known to do chair massage and craft fairs at elevator installer conferences because we were the only booth that had a free neck rub while you ordered a dumbwaiter. So, and I got a lot of money out of the deal, and this was before I wrote anything, unfortunately, because I could have been like, you know, I've got a book. But the style of the pitch really hasn't changed any. So, you know, I think you just don't limit yourself unless you are comfortable with those limitations. If you want to be everywhere, or if you're painfully shy, then that whole space is yours to command.
And you can't even presume your audience. We were at that conference in Millville. It was from like the women's like Rotary Club or something. And it was a dozen old ladies, and they wanted to hear about all the erotica books. And it was like,
Thank you, 50 Shades.
Okay, you guys maybe you were old enough to remember D.H. Lawrence, and it's popular.
Yeah.
And their husbands weren't there, so it was a safe conversation.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
All right, so you start the next one, or the last of the official